At exactly 11:47 p.m., the metal lever under 40 years of rust screamed like it had been waiting its whole life for this moment. Above me, through water that had guarded my family's secret since before most of these McMansions even existed, emergency lights were already slicing the surface like police spotlights at a crime scene. They had no clue what was coming. None of them did. 500 homes went black in the same heartbeat. No flicker, no polite brownout warning. Just instant, absolute darkness rolling across Pleasant Grove estates like someone yanked the plug on a greedy toddler's nightlight. The $30 million community green energy microhydro plant that had been humming along on stolen water for exactly 6 hours, 14 minutes, and 32 seconds suddenly choked to death. Its turbines screamed like spoiled Karens denied their pumpkin spice lattes, then died with a wet, pathetic gurgle. I surfaced near the old dock my grandfather hammered in when I was 7, water streaming off my wetsuit, boots crunching on rocks that had been underwater 2 hours earlier. The lake level had already dropped 3 feet. The intake pipes Regina Hawthorne and her EcoPulse cronies had illegally sunk into my pond, without a single permit, were now sucking nothing but air and regret. From across the mudflat that used to be a lake, I heard the scream that every HOA victim dreams of hearing. You just killed an entire community. Regina Hawthorne, president of the Pleasant Grove Estates Homeowners Association, stood on what was left of her floating platform, designer heels sinking into sludge, her perfect blonde helmet hair collapsing like a cheap cake in the rain. Her voice cracked across the empty basin like a funeral siren for her own ego. I stood there dripping, calm as a man who'd waited 93 days for this exact second, and whispered into the night, "No, Regina. I just took back what you stole while everyone was busy kissing your HOA ring. But let me take you back to how we got here. How a quiet Colorado lake became the center of a federal raid. How the queen of the neighborhood ended up in handcuffs. And how I learned the most dangerous weapon against power-tripping Karens isn't money, lawyers, or even the law. It's patience. It's proof. And sometimes it's one rusty lever nobody else knew existed. 3 months earlier the lake was glass still at sunrise, trout rising like they owned the place. I, Marcus Hale, 46, retired Army Corps engineer, stood on my dock with coffee, watching mist roll across water that had been in my family since 1952. My grandfather bought these 200 acres for what's now 12 grand. The HOA McMansions sprouted around it in the 80s like cheap weeds, but my deed was ironclad. My land was never part of their little kingdom. Then the diesel engines arrived. 3 flatbeds, orange flags, and a white Mercedes with plates reading Hawthorne, 1. Regina stepped out like she was accepting an Oscar for Best Neighborhood Dictator. Tailored pastel suit, salon hair that probably cost more than my truck, and that smile. The one that says, "I'm being nice right now, but I will ruin you." "Mr. Hale," she cooed before I could speak, "we need to chat about this water feature." "Water feature? My grandfather taught me to swim here. My father taught me to fish here. I scattered my wife's ashes here 18 months ago. She called it a water feature." "This is private property," I said, voice low. "You're trespassing." She opened her leather folder with a theatrical snap and slid out a document that looked official enough to fool idiots. According to the Pleasant Grove Emergency Green Energy Initiative, this body of water has been reclassified as community infrastructure. 500 families need reliable backup power. The county approved our microhydro plant last month. We're putting it to work. I scanned the paper. Forged faster than a bad check. No state water commission signature. No wetland study. Classic HOA magic. Rules for thee, none for me. Progress doesn't wait for little pieces of paper. "Marcus," she said, patting my shoulder like I was a confused puppy. "Your lake has been sitting here useless for 70 years. Time to share." My lake had been doing exactly what lakes do, existing, while she and her husband siphoned HOA dues into shell companies. I smiled the way engineers smile when they spot a fatal flaw in a design. "That document has zero authority over 1952 deed land. See you in court." She laughed, actually laughed, and walked away. "Familiarize yourself with our community standards, dear. Your property may not be in the HOA yet." That night I photographed every tire track, every flag, every illegal pipe. Then I opened my father's fireproof box and found the yellowed blueprint labeled in his neat hand, Emergency Drainage System. A 72-inch valve 20 feet down, capable of dumping 50 million gallons in 8 hours. Installed in 1968 as flood control, registered, never used. A nuclear option hidden under silt. I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. First I tried playing by their rules. My lawyer filed for an injunction. Construction never slowed. Every morning, I woke to jackhammers. Every evening, more violation notices appeared in my mailbox like HOA confetti. Grass exceeds 3 inches, $250. Mailbox color non-compliant, $350. Unauthorized swimming in community water feature between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., $500. I was being fined for existing on my own land. When I called the appeals line, it went straight to a voicemail that was permanently full. Classic. The hearing was a joke. Judge, who just happened to play golf with Regina's husband, ruled community benefit outweighs individual claim. Construction could continue. Trial in 8 months. By then the plant would be online and untouchable. That evening old Earl, who'd fished here since Nixon was president, leaned against his truck. Your daddy would have handled this different, son. He pointed at the half-finished platform. Answers are in the boathouse. Inside the dusty boathouse, I found the metal box. Inside, my father's journal. Annual valve inspections. Final note in different ink. Only if they come for the water, son. I read it until the stars came out. They thought permits and connections and community standards could steal 70 years of ownership. They were about to learn what happens when patience meets preparation. I spent weeks building an airtight file. Photos, emails, midnight deliveries, falsified environmental reports. I dove at night, mapped the intake pipes sucking 50,000 gallons an hour. I sent Regina a registered letter warning of structural concerns with the water table and recommending immediate shutdown. She signed for it, then tossed it. I have the crumpled receipt and the security guard who fished it out of her trash. The grand opening was pure theater. Regina in cream silk, cutting a ribbon while the mayor clapped. Today we achieve energy independence, she beamed. No more blackouts, no more reliance on the grid. All thanks to our natural resources. I watched from the hill with binoculars. None of them knew those natural resources belonged to the guy they'd been fining for breathing. 3 days later the plant went live. My mailbox brought the final notice, eminent domain proceedings. 30 days to vacate. They weren't just stealing the water, they were stealing my house. That was the moment I stopped being polite. Friday night, the investors' party lit up the platform like a floating Vegas casino. Champagne, jazz, Regina in an evening gown accepting praise. At 11:15 p.m., I slipped into the cold water. No light, no noise, just muscle memory and 3 months of practice. 20 feet down the valve wheel waited. 3 clockwise turns, exactly as Dad wrote. The first turn released the seal. The second engaged the beast. The third the lake woke up and decided it was done being stolen from. I surfaced, changed clothes, and poured coffee on my porch. At 12:15, the first worker ran out waving a flashlight. By 12:30, the intakes were gasping. At 1 o'clock, the turbines screamed, safety shutdowns tripped, and Pleasant Grove estates plunged into darkness. 500 homes, air conditioners, security systems, baby monitors, everything, silenced. Regina's Mercedes fishtailed down the access road at 1:23 a.m. She sprinted across mud in her gown, mascara running like cheap war paint. What did you do? I stepped out of the shadows. Opened a legally registered 1968 flood control valve on my own property. You were warned. You signed for the letter. Then you trashed it. Her face crumpled. You can't. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. I held up my phone. Already emailed the FBI, the state AG, and the EPA. 3 months of evidence. Every bribe, every falsified report, every dollar of HOA dues you and your husband funneled into shell companies. You're done, Regina. By sunrise, the lake was a mud flat. News choppers swarmed. By noon, the FBI was crawling the site. By evening, Regina was arrested in her mud-caked gown on wire fraud and embezzlement charges. The dominoes fell beautifully. County officials resigned. The HOA was dissolved by terrified homeowners who finally saw the receipts. 6 months later, the lake was refilling from springs that never cared about HOA rules. The platform sat at a sad 45-degree angle, a $30 million monument to what happens when a Karen forgets whose water she's stealing. Regina got 8 years. Her husband got 6. The CEO pled to probation. And every former neighbor who once called me that crazy hermit now waves when they drive past. Sometimes I still sit on the dock at dawn, coffee in hand, watching mist roll across water that's finally mine again. The trout are back. The herons are nesting. And the only sound is waves against pilings my grandfather drove in 60 years ago. People ask what I learned. I tell them the same thing every time. Patience isn't weakness. Documentation isn't paranoia. And the quietest guy on the block is usually the one holding the lever. So here's the question that keeps me up at night, and should keep you thinking too. When an HOA Karen uses community good to steal what's yours, rewrite the rules, and threaten everything you love, who's really the villain? The guy who finally said enough and drained the lake? Or the smiling president who thought she could own the water, the land, and the truth? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. And if this gave you even a flicker of that sweet, sweet justice high, smash that like button. It tells me to keep telling these stories until every power-tripping HOA Karen learns the same hard lesson. See you in the next one. Stay patient and keep your levers oiled.